Good morning. It's an honor to be here. I would like to thank Monsignor Marcelo Sorondo for this opportunity. Brazilian human trafficking experience, especially for the purpose of forced labor, can be compared to a chess game. Strategy, movements, advance, and setbacks mark the history of the fight against this atrocious crime. But besides the accomplishments, we always face new challenges. We have worked hard in the last 2 decades. This story begins in September 1989, when José Pereira, 17 years old, and a co-worker nicknamed Paraná, tried to escape from gunmen that prevented the departure of workers from the farm Espírito Santo, which means Holy Spirit. They and another 60 workers were forced to work without paying in inhumane and illegal conditions. After the escape, the farm staff ambushed them. With rifle fire, they killed Paraná and struck the hand and the eye of José Pereira. The criminals put José in the trunk of a car, and later, José, who was pretending to be dead, was abandoned on the road 20 kilometers from the crime scene. José Pereira asked for help at the nearest farm and was driven to a hospital. In the city, where he underwent treatment for injuries he suffered, José Pereira reporting the working conditions to the federal police. When went to the farm, the federal police found 60 workers who were later rescued and received money to return home. What happened? Nothing happened. The gunmen had fled. Nothing has been investigated. No one was punished. This is an example of Brazil's failure to fulfill its obligations of human rights protection, judicial protection, and safety at work. Therefore, some non-governmental organizations filed a complaint against Brazil in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights of the Organization of American States in 1994. After years of discussion, the Brazilian government acknowledged its responsibility in the case of José Pereira and signed a friendly settlement agreement. It was from this complaint that the different sectors of the Brazilian society recognized the existence, severity, and characteristics of forced labor in the country. In the last 20 years, Brazil has made concerted efforts to identify and prosecute cases of contemporary slavery. From the mid-1990s to the end of 2015, some 49,000 workers were rescued from rural and urban workplaces in which inspectors determined that they had been reduced to a condition analogous to slavery. In 1995, the Special Mobile Inspection Group was created. Once informed of the practice of slave labor, inspectors from the Ministry of Labor and labor prosecutors, accompanied by agents from the Federal Police and the Federal Highway Police, go to the location to ascertain the facts. The mobile group collects testimonies from workers, takes pictures, films the crime scene, and prepares a report that will form the basis of the charge in criminal and civil cases. Brazil has a specialized judicial branch called labor justice, where it's common to sue employers who violate labor rights. Labor justice is not a criminal justice, but it enables workers to get compensation. Under the supervision of the inspectors, the labor contracts are canceled, employers are charged for back pay, and unemployment insurance payments are provided. The outcome of the inspections made it clear to the Brazilian government that a more sophisticated approach and a greater range of administrative responses were required to address contemporary slavery. Since its enactment in 1940, the Brazilian Penal Code has pronounced the conduct of reducing a person to a condition analogous to that of a slave as a felony. And yet, apart from being referenced by criminal commentators, this was a forgotten provision. But in 2003, Congress passed a statute that reformed the Article 149 of the Brazilian Penal Code. The reform stemmed from the experience of the mobile group and their partners inside and outside the government. Now, it's a crime to reduce someone to a condition analogous to that of a slave in 4 situations. First, submit them to forced labor. Second, submit them to debilitating work days. Third, submit them to degrading conditions. And at last, restrict their freedom of movement for any reason. This approach rejects the idea that real slavery requires control of the body, which would be primarily an offense against individual liberty. Thus, we have a definition of slavery that does not require forced labor and doesn't involve the concept of locks and chains. I don't know if it's a concept that is at the forefront, but it has worked for us for more than 10 years. The penalty for this crime is 2 to 8 years in prison, plus fines. A year later, in 2004, a list was organized by the government to publicize the names of companies determined to be exploiting workers under conditions analogous to slavery. It's called the dirty list, a kind of blacklist where the names of corporations conducting forced labor are put. When a corporation's name is on the list, it can't receive loans from federal banks. It opens them up to lawsuits, international trade restrictions, and reputational damage in national and international market. Actually, it's an effort to promote social responsibility. The dirty list is a controversial name and shame strategy towards eliminating slavery from major industries. To increase the impact of the dirty list, the Brazilian Pact to Eradicate Slave Labor was created in 2005. It aims to implement tools so that the corporate sector in Brazilian society avoid dealing with suppliers that have made use of slave labor. The initiative already joins 130 Brazilian companies, commercial associations, and social organizations, which are responsible for an annual gross income equivalent to more than 20% of Brazil's gross national product. Recently, in 2014, Congress passed a constitutional amendment which expropriates urban or farm real estate in which slave labor has occurred without compensation. Proceeds from the sale of the real estate and other property used in the commitment of this crime will be applied to urban or agrarian reform or to support anti-slavery efforts. As I said, we have worked hard, but we still face new challenges. For example, a concerning development is a Senate bill passed by a joint committee that dramatically narrows the definition of slave labor. That could have a chilling effect on prosecutors in both the labor and the criminal courts. Putting workers in degraded conditions or submitting them to debilitating work days would be excluded as slave labor crimes. But get back into the chessboard. I have been involved in this match since 2008, when I adjudicated dozens of criminal cases involving slave labor in rural areas of the Amazon region. Nowadays, I don't sit on the criminal bench, but as a law professor, last year, I founded the Slave Labor and Human Trafficking Clinic of the UFMG Law School, with support from the University of Michigan. It's part of a pioneer initiative with a pro bono ethos to form an international system of law clinics. It's located in Minas Gerais, the state where the most cases of slave labor in Brazil were documented in 2014. The UFMG clinic, just as Brazilian higher education, has three components: outreach, teaching, and research. Through our outreach component, we provide free legal assistance to survivors. Students work directly with victims to address their legal needs, which, in some cases, might lead them to also identifying possible human rights violations. The survivors are often illiterate and don't have financial resources, so accessing remedies is not easy for them. Teaching. Every semester, the clinic's directors teach law students about slave labor and human trafficking in a classroom setting. Class lectures, exercises, and simulations empower the students and help them to begin to develop an important set of skills they use to advance human rights as professionals. And research. Students enroll in the clinic also conduct research, write papers, and attend, organize, and promote seminars. We work with government agencies and NGOs to develop a network of contacts. If human trafficking is a transnational crime, we have to concert our efforts transnationally. For me, that is our biggest challenge. We should work together. We should cooperate with each other. This will ensure a constant exchange of information between on-the-ground actors, which will, in turn, help give the estimated millions of slaves in the world what they deserve: a voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ahora invitamos a Virginia Kendall.